Hello, everyone. Thank you to Cook County Higher Ed and Kelsey Kennedy for hosting tonight and for Hillary Freeman for inviting me to be the speaker for tonight's event. And I am excited to share more about this fascinating little insect that is commonly found in the rivers and streams along the North Shore of Lake Superior. I'll start by sharing just a little bit about myself. I am Kalli Hawkins. I grew up in Grand Marais, graduated from Cook County High School many years ago. And after a stint living out west, I recently returned home to Grand Marais. My whole family is still here. And I found myself, after arriving back in Grand Marais, wearing multiple hats. And some of those include writing and media and radio and donuts and the outdoors. So it's kind of all the above. I have a lot of hats in the town. My fascination with stoneflies, which we'll be learning about tonight, started about 6 years ago when I first learned how to fly fish. And fly fishing has been a passion of mine ever since I caught my first fish on a fly rod about 6 years ago while I was living out west. And pun intended, I was hooked ever since. Since moving back home to Grand Marais, I have continued my passion for fly fishing. A little bit different style compared to out west, but I have kept with it and dabbled in a different aspect of fly fishing, which I can talk about later if anyone is interested. Just an introduction to stoneflies for those that may not know this curious little insect. When Hillary Freeman with the North Shore chapter of Master Naturalists asked me to be the speaker for tonight's event, I was a bit hesitant because I am by no means an entomologist or an expert on all things bugs or insects, but I have a deep appreciation for stoneflies that has developed over time just as my experience as someone who fly fishes and as an angler for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years or so. I also have a soft spot in my heart for the often overlooked animals and insects that don't get as much attention, but play just as much of a key role in the health and longevity of our North Shore ecosystem. Well, there are so many fascinating insects hidden underneath the surface of a river or a stream that we could spend more than an hour talking about. We are going to focus tonight on one insect in particular, the stonefly. Stoneflies are one of the most common aquatic insects found in trout waters throughout North America and are common to many streams and rivers along the North Shore of Lake Superior. Stoneflies are vital ecological indicators of North Shore rivers and streams, and beyond their role as indicators, stoneflies are a cornerstone of the aquatic food web. They serve as a favorite food source for various fish species and are highly valued by fly anglers, myself included. And stoneflies are bottom-dwelling species that scour the stream bed for leaf droppings and a suitable rock, log, or stick to attach to as they navigate the stream. As I mentioned, stoneflies are insects that spend their lives near water or underneath the river or surface of a river or stream. After a female stonefly has deposited the eggs directly into the river or stream or along the edge of a river sometimes, the stonefly then changes into the image on the left here, the nymph stage. And during this stage, the stonefly has a soft, elongated, flattened body with 3 pairs of legs and a pair of sensory appendages at the end of the abdomen. On their back, they also have 2 sets of wing cases compared to 1 that mayflies have. And the stonefly, the fascinating thing about it, the stonefly actually lacks a pupal stage. As they grow, they transition straight from egg to nymph and then into adult stage. And they essentially push through their old exoskeleton, leaving behind a husk or a shuck, which is commonly referred to. In the nymph stage, they breathe through a strongly developed gill system or directly through their exoskeleton and are incredibly dependent on highly oxygenated water. Stoneflies thrive in relatively fast-flowing water, and they do not survive in stagnant or pollutant water. And the stonefly nymphs have fixed gills that often extract oxygen in clean-flowing water. While there are thousands of stonefly species that live across North America and the world, they are more prevalent in colder climates or higher elevations compared to the warmer southern rivers due to the fact that they rely on colder water, which contains more oxygen. Stonefly nymphs spend most of their young life under the riverbed, tucked in some crevices and spaces between stones and pebbles, all trying to evade being eaten by a fish or another predator. And as they mature, they feed on benthic algae, leaves, and rooted vegetation. For as much time as they spend in the water, they are not the best of swimmers, surprisingly, and mostly crawl to gather their food. When I first started out fly fishing, this is the stage and the appearance of a stonefly that I am most familiar with, and mostly because the majority of their life are spent in this stage. As you can see, they can range from about 1 to 3 years in this nymph stage compared to their adult stage, which is very short-lived. Stoneflies don't hatch in the same manner that mayflies do. Instead, the stonefly migrates from deeper pools and riffles towards shore and then crawls out of the water onto rocks, logs, or other debris. And the adult stage, as I mentioned, is very short-lived, just a couple of weeks. And surprising thing about the adult stage, even though they do grow those really long wings, they actually are not the best insects for flight as well. They tend not to fly a lot, even though they do have the capability and they do have the long wings. They tend to stay along the riverbed and along the shores. When stonefly nymphs are about to emerge and begin the transition process into an adult, they start their migration, heading from faster currents towards shore, where they can go through their metamorphosis. During the time of this migration, generally it happens at dusk or at just before dark. It's when you can usually find them at their greatest numbers along the edges of the riffles or closest to the shore. And at this time, trout can often be spotted in these shallow waters by the river's bank as they're patiently waiting for an easy meal. After they gather close to shore, they continue their journey towards the land, usually far from the shore, climbing out on surrounding rocks, trees. They can even climb up to the top of the trees or farther up along the tree. And this is where they emerge, leaving their nymphal cast shucks. And I wish I had one here that I could show you, but maybe you've overturned a rock as you're walking up the river and you've seen something about this length that looks like an empty shuck or cast or a husk. And they're usually really dark or can be darker sometimes. You'll see them about maybe they're debris or sticks broken down, but those are actually stonefly casts. After they gather close to shore, they'll continue their journey on the land, as I mentioned, and then their wings will get released from their wing cases. And after a couple minutes, the wings get hard enough that they can take off and fly. Or if they don't, they hang out on the ground for a little bit longer until the wings do fully form and harden. And so as you can see here on the PowerPoint, female deposits the eggs into the river. That nymph stage will take about 1 to 3 years until it finally crawls out onto land and hatches into an adult. My fascination with the little stonefly critters that live underneath the rivers and streams along the North Shore led me to Karen Colby recently, who has an extensive professional background as an interpretive naturalist. And we connected last summer and spent an afternoon walking up Cadence here just east of town with a kick net, looking for some aquatic invertebrates, and it was so much fun. We had such a lovely afternoon, and I learned so much more than I had already known. Karen has an affinity for small fish and aquatic invertebrates, and then my interest in stoneflies just only grew after spending an hour, actually quite a few hours with her in the afternoon. And as I mentioned, stoneflies are bottom-dwelling species that scour the stream bed for leaf droppings and a suitable rock or log or stick to attach to. So in order to find the stoneflies, you kind of have to kick up the debris on the bottom of the riverbed and just make some disturbance with that net strategically placed so that it will catch the detached stoneflies as they release from the sticks or the logs or rocks. And then here's some photos from our Cadence adventure looking for stoneflies last summer, and Karen holding a stonefly in the far right photo. We found a handful of other insects that day too, so it was a lot of fun to learn about dragonflies and water spiders and all sorts of insects. And you may have noticed that Karen is wearing a stonefly t-shirt. She came fully prepared that morning. So the question is, why are these kind of weird looking insects that live underneath the water so important? Why should we care about them? Well, stoneflies provide ecosystem services as indicators of water quality, food for predators such as fish, and are mediators of energy flow and nutrient cycling. They're often the first insects to be lost from freshwater systems after relatively minor nutrient enrichment degradation of habitat, or changes in aquatic systems. Stoneflies are among the most pollution sensitive of aquatic insects, and while they can exist in slight to moderately polluted streams, it is not very common. Some examples of pollution that could impact stoneflies are agricultural practices, wastewater treatment plants, urban runoff, or significant changes in water temperature, such as warming of the water, since they require cold water with high levels of oxygen. So if you head out to your favorite North Shore river or stream with a kick net like Karen and I did last summer, you can get a relatively quick idea of the overall health of a river based on the number of stoneflies that you find. Fortunately, we found a lot of stoneflies, as I mentioned, a handful of other aquatic insects while we were at Cadence last summer. I believe that was in August. So as of last August, Cadence is looking good and healthy as ever. And I know that Karen ventures out frequently with her kick net to many other North Shore rivers, and I'm hoping to join her at some point here, maybe next summer. The ecological consequences due to the loss of stonefly species along the North Shore and in other regions of the US can greatly impact our fish populations. Stoneflies play a crucial role in the diet of many fish species. And stoneflies are often found in healthy, clean, freshwater environments, making them readily available to fish. Stonefly nymphs are rich in protein and nutrients, making them an excellent source of sustenance for fish. And unlike various other aquatic insects that have limited hatches throughout the year, stoneflies can be found in various life stages year-round, providing a consistent food source for fish. As I mentioned, stoneflies play a beneficial role in the aquatic community, and they're kind of this hidden gem of environmental monitoring to a certain degree. Stream aquatic invertebrates are widely used by researchers to monitor and assess stream degradation because they're affected by the physical, chemical, and biological conditions in a stream. The aquatic insects are particularly valuable for evaluating how human activities affect the aquatic ecosystem, the terrestrial ecosystem, and the atmosphere. And because stonefly habitat requirements are so specific, their absence from a river or stream does not inherently mean that the water body is polluted, but that their presence is a reliable indicator of a high quality, minimally polluted stream. Several traits common in stoneflies make them particularly susceptible to potential impacts from climate change. They have limited dispersal potential and therefore have difficulty migrating to areas with more suitable conditions. They also are a larger bodied insect with less efficient respiration than any other types of aquatic insects, so dissolved oxygen needs are high. And they also have a lower reproductive capacity, making pollutions more susceptible to impacts from drought and warmer weathers when eggs can be damaged from warmer and drier conditions. Another potential impact is the cultural loss of fishing over time due to diminished stonefly populations as an important food source for many fish species. Stonefly nymphs are large and energy-packed insects that are favored by many big fish in fast-moving river and streams and are an important source of year-round food. One of the many fish species it could impact is the coaster brook trout, which is pictured here. And the brook trout or coaster brook trout is a form of brook trout that spend part of its life in relatively sheltered near-shore waters of Lake Superior. The native fish returns to the streams in the fall, and there's an extensive history on the native species, which I won't dive into in depth tonight, but you can be found on the Minnesota DNR website. In the past 30 years, actually more than that, quite a few, in the past 30 years plus, there have been extensive progress made in research conducted with the Minnesota DNR to improve habitat and populations for this native fish species in Lake Superior and then along the North Shore. A couple examples from fly fishing from myself. Here are some examples of stonefly imitations that I have used and other fly fishing anglers have used to imitate the life of a nymph stonefly, and then a couple of them that might mimic the adult phase of a stonefly. And I have a handful of different, mostly nymph shapes and sizes that I use personally, and I know that many others do as well. Most of those are just to target trout in moving water. And the ones at the bottom right here have more of a foam body to the fly so that it will float on top of the water rather than underneath the water to mimic that bottom dwelling stonefly. Can also mimic an ant or another insect too. Just hoping that essentially a fish will bite it to a certain degree. Many people in the fly fishing community or even outside the fishing world may have heard the term match the hatch. And essentially it's ensuring that whatever lure or bait you are using to entice a bite, that it matches as closely as possible to the food in which your target species of fish is currently feeding upon. The goal essentially is to recreate or mimic the insect in appearance or movement so that the fish mistakes it for the real insect or stonefly and hopefully get a big fish. When I first started fly fishing, I had a certain level of intimidation because I felt that I had to become an expert in entomology in order to catch a fish, and that wasn't the case, thankfully. I just had to learn to tell the difference between some of the main insects such as mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, and various others. And now, with that being said, that I believe I am a better fly fisherman that understands certain insects and their life cycles, their movements in the river, and the overall habitat and ecosystem. And I am still learning. It's a process, and fly fishing is always a constant learning process. But the challenge is why I keep with it and why I am so fascinated with the little insects underneath the water and riverbeds. And I can't also complain about spending a morning, afternoon, or evening standing in a river or lake, even if I don't catch a fish. And I wasn't sure I was able to fill an entire hour, but if anyone has any questions on stoneflies, fly fishing, stonefly life cycle, please let me know.
I do. I was wondering when the stoneflies hatch, or what time of year would they be crawling out?
Yeah, it depends on the various regions. It can be spring, fall, and some in like western areas. Primarily, I would say in the spring. And you also have the running, like the spawning for many of the fish that sometimes coincide with some of the hatches. The mayflies, or sorry, the stoneflies don't hatch like you would see those massive plumes of mayflies that we do all over, Devil's Track Lake or many other lakes. Stoneflies, as I mentioned, kind of stay closer to the riverbeds, and you're not flying all around per se.
Not seeing other questions yet, so I would encourage you in the room if you have any questions to ask.
Are there predators like that once they hatch and they're out of the water, they have predators in the air or on land?
Yeah, birds to a certain degree. Once they crawl out, they're obviously very susceptible to predators. Birds swooping down, ravens, blue jays, all the above, essentially sparrows. Yeah, and so birds would be primarily the biggest thing I can think of. Others outside of fish, and then any other small little mammal or critter that wants, an easy snack that since they're sitting out waiting for their wings to harden up a little bit. Yeah.
Do they start when they hatch small and then they grow up to that, like, what's it, about a half inch or inch?
Yeah, they're about they can go up to about 2
really?
inches, up to about 2 inches or so. The picture with Karen here. It's about that big. And we caught quite a few in her little kick net, and then pulled them out, put them in a plastic container, and then we can pick them out individually. But they can grow up in the top end of their nymph stage, about that size.
But you can see little ones too.
Yeah, and then they go through in the cast, you can pick them out, they'll be this size or they'll be this size. It depends on what stage within that nymph stage that they are in, which is like 1 to 3 years. So they continue to grow throughout that phase.
And they throw off a cast every.
Yeah,
They can.
yeah, it's kind of just like a hollow log to a certain extent. Kind of hard to.
That's not just when they leave the water.
They shed that. It's kind of like this exoskeleton that they shed as they're crawling out of the water.
Right,
And then
but
they-
before that, when
Yep.
they're just in the water, do they use a cast to change? Or?
Yeah, so they kind of looking at this to a certain degree, you can see the different sizes and shapes that fly fishermen use to mimic that. So there are different stages within that nymph. So it could be very tiny flies to mimic this stage, that they're early in that nymph stage. And then those larger ones, like the wired stonefly, obviously you'll be kind of maximized out about 2 inches or so. And yeah, the thing is, you can look over, you can, if you want to just be curious, if you don't even have a kick net, you can just walk up a river and overturn a rock or a log, pull out all the water, and you can see stoneflies on the bottom, and you can just determine it that way, if there's stoneflies in the river or how many to a certain extent, or if you were curious on what they look like, you can do that rather than having the full setup with all of the plastic containers and the kick nets and all of the gear and equipment.
Do they tend to kind of be still when you turn over?
Yeah, 'cause they
scurry away?
They have kind of, they like to attach to things and stick to things because you have flowing water it's moving really fast. So they need to attach themselves to a physical thing so that they're not carried away in the current. So yes, they pretty much, you kind of might have to shake them loose a little bit if you flip over a rock and they're still on there. You can kind of pick them off a little bit if needed. But usually if you, as I mentioned, kicking the ground a little bit, kicking rocks, kicking logs, that'll help detach them to a certain degree. But you can also lift over the rock and pick them up too.
We have a question online.
Yeah.
Are they found in all rivers in Minnesota, only trout streams? What about where the trout are being reintroduced?
Yeah, they are found throughout Minnesota and throughout North America and the world. They're primarily found in colder conditions, colder water temperatures compared to the southern regions. They are found in not a lot. They're commonly found along the North Shore because our water is a little cleaner, less polluted due to we don't have as many agricultural runoff or urban runoffs in the southern region in some areas or central Minnesota. So it depends on the practices in the region for runoff in the rivers and health of a river to a certain extent. But they are found commonly throughout all the tributaries and North Shore streams, I'd say.
Wonderful.
I don't
Are
have a full list, but I bet I can look at the Minnesota DNR, see if they have a full list.
That's a great place for people to look.
Yeah, there isn't, the thing is, it's a very understudied insect and under-researched insect. And while there are researchers that have dived into the ecological impacts of what the loss of this potential insect could mean, it's very understudied and they don't know for certain what it could be long-term. And so there's a lot of research currently going on right now to look at how would potentially climate change impact this insect due to increased water temperatures, reduced oxygen levels, what that implication would have for fish populations and beyond, outside of what we can comprehend now on aquatic insects and what role they play within the aquatic community.
Another question that came up, are stoneflies found in the driftless region?
They are, yep, in that southern region of Minnesota, driftless area. Yeah, they're found all over for the most part, especially clean, fast moving water. They're not going to be found necessarily in lakes or rivers because they need that fast flowing river and that highly oxygenated water.
Questions more from in person for you guys?
I was just looking at these antennae,
Yeah,
because they had some in the back too.
yeah, they have antennas in the front. They've got all they're very complex. They actually have like 2 compound eyes and then 3 separate eyes. And I was trying to dive into the research of what the difference between what the significance of why they have so many different eyes. But yeah, they're a very unique looking insect. And they have feelers on the bottom of their abdomen, kind of the sensors on the bottom of their abdomen. And I would imagine that the back end of those antennas is kind of serves a similar purpose too.
But they don't run away. They don't run.
Yeah, I mean, they
slowly away.
they crawl on the ground in the bottom of the river, but if you were to, like pick up a rock or something, it's gonna, for the most part, maybe not everyone, want to stick to that rock. some of them might scurry away, or it might feel safe enough that it stays there. They're pretty easy to find if you go diving into the bottom of the riverbed.
How fast do they move?
I've never really seen one move very fast. I mean, when we had these here and they were just sitting in the plastic, they didn't move. And we were touching them and moving them and picking them up, and they didn't run away. They weren't moving. They weren't crawling fast. They kind of just hunkered down and hung out. So
I'm on the food chain.
yeah. I'm caught. I'm done now.
And then, are they the main food source for trout?
One of, in addition to stoneflies, trout will feed on mayflies and caddisflies and other various small insects within a river. They are, I'd say, the most prominent of a food source for trout, which is why their significance is, not to say it's more important than caddisflies per se. It's just that they are one of the main food sources for trout.
I didn't know, like, if there are a dozen or if there are hundreds of different species of.
Yeah, there are,
or
there's thousands across the world. I'd say 2,000 or more of different species
of stoneflies.
Oh. And it's not known exactly how many species are along the North Shore, because every now and then a new one pops up. And so there's, I'd say 200-ish, maybe somewhere in the hundreds of just in North Shore, along the North Shore.
Wow. Yeah, somebody needs to start studying this.
Yeah.
Kelly's side job.
Yeah, my other hat I'll put on.
Some questions. Can we eat them?
I wouldn't. That's personal. I'm sure they are edible because they're edible for fish. And if you were on the show alone, or if you were stranded, I'm sure they would do, because they are high in protein. Fish love them. I would imagine they would do just fine. I've never heard of anybody eating a stonefly, but it's got to be a first somewhere.
Yeah, the person that asked, maybe it's a side project for your future.
There you go.
Another question, do stoneflies have gills like some mayflies?
They do have gills, and that's how they are able to basically breathe within the river system, and that's why so they absorb that oxygen within the water into those gills. And they actually can absorb the oxygen within that exoskeleton, kind of that husk or case to a certain extent too.
What do they do in the winter?
They live year round. Yeah, they stay in this nymph form throughout the winter. I do know in some areas that they can hatch throughout the winter into this adult stage, but they'll stay frozen, I mean, they don't freeze, but the river will freeze and they stay underneath there and they're able to stay alive. Yeah, they thrive in year round and are a source of food for fish year round too.
Well, as we let people think of some more questions that might be interesting, I would love to invite Hillary to talk about the North Shore Minnesota Naturalist Group for a second, as you think of more questions for everyone.
Great. First of all, Kalli, thank you so much. I know nothing about stoneflies, so this has been a exciting putting a bug in my ear, so to speak. But we have a North Shore chapter that just formed this year of the Minnesota Master Naturalists. We have a North Shore chapter. We're a small but mighty group, and we've offered this fall, thanks to Kelsey and collaboration, we've been doing an online book Zoom. We've done a couple field trips up here, and we try to make it known what we're doing. Our next event after this, I'm going to put a plug in, is the book White Pine, December 12th. And actually, John Pastor, the author, said, "Would you mind if I led this book group?" I mean, really? So, of course. So you can find the information through CCHE, and it's registration for that. So on the 12th of December from 6:30 to 7:30, John Pastor, the author of White Pine, will lead the discussion about how he wrote this book, answer questions, and I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. So I want to thank many of you who are not from Grand Marais for joining on this. And I think one of the strengths of Master Naturalists is that we can share with each other. And so welcome to all of you. And it's a little bit about our chapter. Maybe have about 30-some people in it, and we try to meet monthly, but winter is coming, so we'll be Zooming it. Look forward to more book groups and other exciting adventures. All right, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Hey, I have a question for you, Hillary, though. Are you looking for more people to lead some more of the book groups as we go into the new year? Because I know we have one set for January, but wondering about into March, and April, and May.
Well, right now, oh, you're welcome for holding our meetings with Zoom options. You're very welcome. We will probably be looking at some additional books. We have them through January and February. And because they've been really well attended, we'll probably select some more titles. And if anyone tonight on the Zoom has a book that you really think we all need to read and have conversations, how Kalli got invited was that she was on the one on insects, and I said, we talked about what can we all do, and she mentioned the word, well, we can always do education. And I said, what are you educated about? She said, Stoneflies. I said, fine. So that's how she came to be tonight. And so we're always looking for ideas, and we partner with Drury Lane Books and also your local libraries. So you don't need a collection of a variety of topics. So that's what's coming up. And hopefully we'll have some for March and April at least. Get us through the winter.
Good time of year to be looking for putting them on your holiday list for family members to maybe gift you one of these books for the future. Well, any other questions people have been having as you had that moment of pause to ask yourself what other things you want to know about stoneflies or about these wonderful fish, or just about Kalli and all of her work that she's been doing recently?
Yeah, I really enjoyed attending the last book club. I think it was like 2 months ago now. And that's how I stumbled on the recruitment of tonight's event. So
it's
Thanks
dangerous
for-
if you attend a
I
book group,
know.
maybe. We have a question that came up. Do any of you tie your flies?
I have done 1 or 2 in the past. I actually just received a whole free kit of fly tying, so that's gonna be my hobby come December. So I have my vise and I have all my feathers, and I also participate in hunting, so I've been saving some feathers from my grouse, and I have a friend who brought back some feathers from Montana, some pheasant feathers. So that's my plan come December, is to start tying my own flies, and so next summer should be quite eventful.
Sounds like some good winter projects.
It is a good winter project. You know, some people like knitting and crochet, and I'll be there flying ties.
It looks like we have somebody that has unmuted themselves. If you'd like to ask your question out loud, feel free to do so. Okay, well, maybe they were just accidentally doing it. We have a question that came up. Are they related, the stoneflies related to damselflies or mayflies? The nymphs look so similar.
They're, I believe, in the same genus as, I want to say, mayflies, damselflies. I do not know off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what it would be.
We'll get back to you.
We'll get back to you. That's a very good question.
Any other questions? This is a great time to unmute yourself. This is also a little bit of a community creator. So if there's something you wanted to share with one another, this is a great time to do it.
Do you have anything in the works, or projects in the works with Joe now that you're gonna be in a different capacity?
For like outdoor related?
Yeah.
Not at the current moment. I have a big passion. Joe and I, the nice thing about Joe at WTIP was we both shared the passion for outdoors, and it was really easy for us to talk outdoors all day and do outdoor stuff together. I'm assuming we will find each other out on the lake come winter for some ice fishing and maybe some other adventures at some point. But I plan to continue up with all the outdoor news and outdoor coverage, and I'm out in the field numerous times throughout the year, so doing fun stuff. Learning new hobbies, learning new things. That's always the challenge.
Just a quickie here. I just want to, for those who aren't from Grand Marais, who Joe is, and that might be helpful, this little conversation, so it becomes a broad conversation, and just might want to fill them in, Kalli, and
Yeah, yeah, so I also, in addition of one of my other hats, as I mentioned at the beginning, is radio. So I work at WTIP Community Radio and here in Grand Marais. And my former co-worker, Joe Fredericks, was the news director at WTIP until last week. He took off to pursue other adventures and opportunities here in Grand Marais. And we shared a lot of time together in the outdoors and talking outdoors, all things WTIP related. And yeah, I guess that helps for a little bit of context.
And he's an author.
And an author, yeah, that too. Avid fisherman, that's for sure.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll start slowly closing this down. Well, we have a great group of people together. We want to say thank you for coming tonight. It's been a lovely time, especially as it gets so dark out. It's nice to have some opportunities to hang out and chat with people that are asking some of the similar questions that we might be asking or thinking about some of the topics that are same as us. We want to say thank you, Kalli, and thank you, Hillary, for recruiting Kalli.
Yes, thank you, Hillary.